Hello everyone, Snoopy Emu here, and welcome back by popular demand. Welcome to the Emu Talk podcast, or Talk. Oh, I already screwed it up. Welcome to the Talk Emu podcast, episode 2. Um, I'm in Blood Gulch this time. I've decided to move my podcast studio across different games that I enjoyed or grew up with. As you can see, I have like the whole cast of Red versus Blue behind me. Uh, so last episode I talked about the games I grew up with that really impacted me, that were important to my life and whatnot. Today I'm going to talk about those games dying tragically. Yes, today's topic is iconic game franchises that fell off. Specifically, franchises, not just like individual games that didn't get enough funding for a sequel, which, I mean, there are a lot of those that are dear to my heart, but this is iconic franchises, not just franchises that were important to me, but big, really big icons in the gaming industry. And I did kind of pick ones that I knew more about just because I don't want to talk about something I don't know about because I'm not gonna know enough about it to talk about it. So I'm kind of just picking games that I have experience with. Now, for some of these games, I know there's some hot button issues in the gaming world with discussing certain games that fall out for certain reasons, like a lot of games in the modern era from Western developers that lose a lot of people for various reasons involving things that might be slightly political and whatnot, and game developers lashing out against their fans, which is always the most clever business strategy. But I'm gonna try to tread on some of those topics with a little decency and diplomacy, because this is a sophisticated podcast, as you can see. Um, And I'm also going to try to refrain from joking about dead Valve games, which is all of them, because Valve refuses to count to three. So, don't really have too much of a format. I just have some names on a list here. I guess the first game I could talk about would be Duke Nukem. That's a famous case. That's just kind of a famously dead game franchise. For the very few people who don't know, Duke Nukem was originally a side-scroller shooter, action side-scroller shooter, kind of akin to something like, I don't know, like Mega Man or Contra, or like just those like 2D action games. And then I think there was also like a top-down one called Manhattan Project. But then, of course, there was the ever popular game Duke Nukem 3D, which was a 3D Duke Nukem first person shooter, very akin to games at the time like Doom or Quake or what have you. And then there was a long awaited Duke Nukem 4 that didn't come out because of development issues with the developers and licensing, just entering a state known as development hell for like 14 years. And then when it finally did release, it was actually kind of, I remember a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers covered it. It was kind of a big thing, a big deal when it finally came out. But by that point, the jokes were kind of outdated, and it didn't really do anything too new or original or exciting. I enjoyed it personally, but it did just feel like one of those one in a million, like late 2000s, early 2010 shooters that just, it didn't really have much of its own identity. It kind of lost the charm that like Duke Nukem 3D had. And yeah, and I don't think we're ever going to see another Duke Nukem. I'm pretty sure the world's pretty much forgotten about Duke, which is sad because he's always been kind of one of my favorite game characters. Uh, but mostly just because he's a parody, yeah, of like all his lines are just taken from old action movies or horror movies, and he's just really cheesy and goofy and kind of a mockery of like the first person shooter protagonists and just like the big tough guys. Uh, but yeah, that one I just kind of wanted to get out of the way because that was kind of one of the more obvious ones. A much older one. Though the next franchise I wanted to bring up was Silent Hill. Um, Kind of because also like Silent Hill's been trying to make a comeback for a long time, and it just isn't sticking for whatever reason. But uh, what kind of killed Silent Hill in the first place? So Silent Hill, I believe, was created purely to rival Resident Evil, and Silent Hill kind of strayed away from the like puzzle aspect that Resident Evil had. Resident Evil was kind of more of like almost kind of felt a little like a murder mystery and like trying to piece together what happened to Bravo team and like find out who the rat is and stuff. And this was a lot more. Silent Hill was a lot more ambient and psychological and just creepy in it. Due to the limitations of the technology at the time, it allowed them to create these very foggy environments that Silent Hill is famous for, because it kept them from having to worry about render draw distance. At the time, on the old consoles, render draw distance was a big issue, and having the foggy environment allowed them to get around that, but it also created some really scary encounters and just this overall ambience that is iconic and synonymous with the series today. And they did a lot of cool tricks with that, with the psychological horror and whatnot. But then over time, uh, like Silent Hill 4, which was a good game, that one's a very divisive one. Because that's when Silent Hill 3 and 4 is where it kind of strayed from the formula that the first two had, kind of in favor of a little more action and kind of more drama, action drama. And then after 4, the title was given to Western developers, and I think that is what just like put Silent Hill in the grave, was giving it to Western developers, because the first game created by the new development team, whose name I don't remember or know, was Silent Hill Homecoming, and I had the displeasure of playing Homecoming, and you can definitely tell they were trying to fit all the trends that were big, because when thinking about these games and talking about these games, it's important to know what else was big at the time. And Homecoming came out in the late 2000s, I believe. I want to say it was 2008. Could be wrong. I want to say it was somewhere around there. At the time, like Mass Effect was really big. Oblivion and stuff were getting pretty big. And Resident Evil 4, Rage, Borderlands, stuff like that was really taking off. And Silent Hill Homecoming tried to add like small mechanics from these types of games, and it just had no place in Silent Hill. It added in like some of the Metroidvania kind of progression stuff was cool, of like having to get new weapons and upgrades, but the like kind of melee centric like combos, like they added in like Dark Souls combat and dialogue options, which had no like role in the story. It wasn't like Mass Effect or a Telltale game where it actually mattered what choices you made and shaped the experience. It is just completely pointless. I don't even know why the dialogue options were there. And then it also just kind of tried to stray or go more in the path of like action. And like the plot was okay, but it did kind of really just rehash the story of Silent Hill 2 with the character like running from trauma that they had forgotten, and at the end there's the whole plot twist that they killed the person they're looking for and repressed it, and which was really shocking and cool in Silent Hill 2, but in Homecoming it was just like you already did that. And making Pyramid Head like a creature in Silent Hill that anyone can see, anyone that like did something really bad can see, really took away from the whole point of Pyramid Head in the first place. And that's one thing that always frustrated me about later Silent Hill games and even the movies is the fact that there were creatures that the whole point of Silent Hill, the whole cool thing, why I loved Silent Hill 2 so much, is that the monsters were all tailored to like the fears and the trauma in the past of the people that were seeing them. And because there are times in Silent Hill 2 where people bring up that they don't see what James is seeing, or James won't see what other people are seeing, but also the characters and entities that can be seen by everyone are tailored to that person, like the famous nurses. The outfits of the nurses change from protagonist to protagonist depending on parts of them, on their personality and whatnot. And Pyramid Head was a creation purely for James to see. It was James's punishment. And when Pyramid Head returned, it wasn't special anymore. It just took away from that plot line. And also like in the movies they had the bed frame enemies, and that even more so was tailored to James because of having to take care of his bedridden wife. It makes no sense for anyone else to see that enemy. So I think a combination of a lot of those things kind of, for me, made Silent Hill worse. And although I didn't play Downpour, I've heard nothing but bad things about its writing and its structure and how they branched away so much from the survival horror elements of it. And now in recent years, I know they've tried to do some more Silent Hill stuff. They try to do, I think, like some episodic stuff. They did the Silent Hill 2 remake, which some of the Silent Hill 2 remake stuff, I remember there was a little controversy there because of I cannot remember the name of the girl. Starts with an A, I think. I don't know. The girl you meet in the graveyard at the beginning. They made her very ugly, and that I know that's been a hot button issue with games lately. Is like characters being unattractive on purpose, or specifically female characters being unattractive, and I'm not saying that does or doesn't make the game, because obviously it has nothing to do with the game. The look of the characters does not affect the story or the gameplay. However, it does affect how fans and people perceive games and perceive their identity, because now there has become this link between ugly characters and poor storytelling, and that has kind of tainted a lot of games and remakes and stuff. That kind of like there's just this connection in people's head now that if there's an ugly character, the game's gonna suck. And I don't know how the Silent Hill 2 remake did, because I don't have a PlayStation. I know it didn't really win anything at the Game Awards, I don't believe. But it looked good. The graphics looked good. Although the main concern, I remember another big concern, like an actual concern, was the fact that they made it third person instead of fixed cameras. I know a lot of people don't like the fixed cameras. I love the fixed cameras. As kind of a Resident Evil purist, I like the fixed cameras in survival horror games. I like the tension it adds. I even like the fixed cameras in like Devil May Cry. And to have it kind of be an over-the-shoulder, more kind of action-driven game, it did feel more like it was kind of trying to mimic Resident Evil, which is funny because Silent Hill was created to rival Resident Evil. So that's just kind of funny. And also, Oh yeah, I have to bring up PT. PT, the infamous attempt to bring back the Silent Hill series. PT, for being such a small little demo, short little game that you can't even get anymore because they took it off the store, the PlayStation Store. That teaser demo, that game is still one of my all-time favorite horror games ever created. And the story writing and the mystery behind it, just so much, you can glean so much just from that little demo in terms of story. But the gameplay, although kind of repetitive, was really interesting and neat, and the puzzles were actually really difficult. And it had the iconic Kojima kind of trolley puzzles where you had to like talk in your microphone, or you had to like do things in the menu. Like now I after my last podcast I started playing the Metal Gear Solid games. Never played those before, and I played the first two, and they were phenomenal. And now I'm kind of more familiar with Kojima's style. So now, like, thinking back on stuff that was in PT, even the false, like, game over screen, the false, like, restart screen, like, seeing kind of the bag of tricks that Kojima has used in Metal Gear Solid 2 and 1, it kind of makes me appreciate it a little more. And it's really sad that that project failed as horrendously as it did, for reasons that felt like they could have been avoided. Yeah, PT is just one of those pieces of gaming history that will always be a fond yet sad memory. Now, straying away from the spooky games, during my childhood, there were kind of two big movements happening in gaming that also kind of affected real life, and two game franchises, kind of technically three, two game franchises that came from that, or kind of started it. The Tony Hawk series, and then the Guitar Hero / Rock Band series. Those were huge when I was in like middle school. They were everywhere. They dominated the market and kind of had a real serious cultural impact. And these games blew up to huge proportions and then just fell flat. Just almost overnight. And I kind of wanted to get into my thoughts on that and why that happened. I think about a big part of it for at least Guitar Hero was oversaturation. But I've always wondered why these games never came back. And for Tony Hawk, that kind of launched the era of like skateboarding. Like when I was a kid, I know there's still skateboarding today. I know people still do it, but it felt like when I was a kid, it was such a big part of culture. It was like everyone was outside skateboarding. Everyone was talking about skateboarding. Tony Hawk was everywhere. The games were huge. You know, you had like Rob Dyrdek on MTV. You had, you know, like skateboarding also got intertwined with like the Jackass stuff with Bam Margera. It was featured in all sorts of music videos and advertisements. And I feel like the Tony Hawk games were a big part of that, a big push for that culture. And starting, of course, with the Pro Skater games on the PlayStation, and then going into the Thug games. And for me, my first was American Wasteland, followed quickly by Project 8. And then after Project 8, there was definitely a tonal shift between American Wasteland and Project 8. Whereas Project 8 felt slightly more grounded, and the mechanics were I think they might have changed developers at that point. Pretty sure Neversoft was still involved, but Project 8 felt the controls, I don't want to say clunky, tighter, I don't know the term, but heavy. It felt heavy. It felt like your skater had real weight to them, and you couldn't just rocket off in a random direction like you could in American Wasteland. You felt so floaty in American Wasteland, but American Wasteland is my favorite Tony Hawk game ever, always will be. I love that game to death. I still play it to this day. And Project 8, though, definitely had a tonal shift, was less ridiculous. But then they made Proving Ground, which Proving Ground felt like they were trying to take what Project 8 did and double down on it. And it just wasn't the same. It was kind of boring. It's like they tried to focus so much on the skateboarding mechanics. I think they were trying to compete with Skate, because Skate had gotten really big at that time. Because it's like not just like the directional controls, because like the Tony Hawk games added in like the nail the trick modes that gave you more directional control, and that's clearly trying to like compete with the Skate mechanics, and also the ragdoll physics and the focus on like bailing your character and whatnot. Like it definitely felt like it was trying to compare itself to Skate and be a little more, I don't know, realistic but also goofy at the same time, and that combination didn't really fit. You can't be realistic and goofy. It just clashes. I know there was a Pro Skater 5. I think they had changed developers by that point, and I heard Pro Skater 5 was just a complete disaster. I didn't even play that one. I didn't even know it came out. And it just doesn't look fun. The camera controls and the mechanics, it just got too weighty and clunky and just kind of just died out, petered out. And I think also just the oversaturation might have, or the, not oversaturation, the idea got exhausted. There was only so much you could do after a while. And then I know Tony Hawk remake happened, the Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake, and I loved it. Great remake. I wish they would have made more content for it, or done a remake of 3 and 4. But I don't know if they ever planned to, but I was really hoping that the Tony Hawk series was coming back, and it seems to have just tapered off again. Which is sad, because the Tony Hawk games are such a part of my childhood. And then also with Guitar Hero and Rock Band, that was another explosion of culture and like gaming. But I think that one was also an oversaturation. They had tons of Guitar Hero games, and they started doing like whole packs for specific artists, and they also did like a Lego Rock Band game. I know Rock Band and Guitar Hero were different developers. Neversoft was Guitar Hero, which is the same people that make Tony Hawk. But Rock Band started doing a bunch of sequels and spin-offs, and I think they also did like that DJ Hero, which was, I don't know, I think that was kind of dumb. And they did like SingStar. That was a different thing, but there were a lot of like new singing games that came out, and rhythm games in general have just kind of tapered off. I know they still exist, but they're not in the mainstream like Rock Band and Guitar Hero were. And I feel like Guitar Hero was really important, and Rock Band, because it inspired so many people to get into music, to play guitar. And for me, Rock Band is part of what kind of inspired me to want to play drums. And also, it was such a good exposure to music, especially old music, like classic rock and metal, and then also introducing some new stuff. Like I brought up in my the last podcast episode where I talked about the games that meant the most to me, I brought up how a lot of bands that I listen to now I first heard for the first time in Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and also Tony Hawk. But I don't know. And what also kind of sucks today is they stopped making the Guitar Hero and Rock Band controllers and instruments, but they still, Rock Band 4 still gets regular updates. It still gets new songs all the time. But if you don't have the stuff to play it, you can't play it. And used sets are so expensive because they're so rare. It's just kind of a pain. I kind of wish that they would, even if they did a limited run, just bring the instruments back. I feel like now we're in an age again where people would be into it. Like enough time has passed, and there's still like rock and metal have kind of gone through a bit of a resurgence recently, at least on the internet. Um, I feel like now would be a good time to bring it all back. We're kind of starting to reach almost not really a regression, but almost more like kind of a retro throwback where that old stuff is kind of becoming cool again, and like people are clinging more to nostalgia. And I think it's because new stuff sucks, like new games, new music, like everything is just kind of dumb now because the ideas have been done so many times that I feel like now people are regressing back to like playing old games and listening to old music and doing the old stuff that they liked as a kid that was fun, rather than venturing into new stuff that is more lackluster or not interesting. Yeah, I'm bad at transitions. Uh, I kind of want to avoid the bombshell. That's the PR disaster one. I guess I can bring up Battlefield. I guess Medal of Honor can also get brought up here. Um, Medal of Honor was huge. Medal of Honor, when I was a kid, Medal of Honor, and Call of Duty were like the titans. Before it was Halo versus Call of Duty or Call of Duty versus Battlefield, it was Medal of Honor and Call of Duty. And Medal of Honor had a bunch of games. It was very popular. This is back like 2004, 5. This is when like Call of Duty 2 and 3 were out. And um, Medal of Honor was the same kind of game as World War II, a little more realistic, I think, which is why I didn't like it as much, probably, because when I was a kid I sucked at games. Um, but uh, what am I trying to say? I'm failing horrifically right now. Medal of Honor. I know that I think Steven Spielberg helped produce those, and they were cool. But Call of Duty blew up so much that it just completely kind of destroyed that franchise. It just like completely became irrelevant because Call of Duty just blew up so much, especially with like Modern Warfare. And now I was going to bring up later at the end, I was going to bring up games that are kind of teetering on the edge of falling off, that are like kind of dying but not quite dead yet, or there's hope. And I'm going to bring up Call of Duty again during that time. But Battlefield more recently has started to die off. Now, I remember when Battlefield 3 came out, and it was awesome. And Battlefield 4 was so cool. And when they released like 1 and then like Hardline and 5 and the newest one, which is what, like 2042 or something, I don't remember what it's called, but the game started to feel a little more Call of Duty-ish. And they're kind of losing what made them special, losing that kind of. And those games were also just kind of tedious for some people. They're tedious for me because like it was so big and expansive, and getting anywhere took forever. And if you died, then you just had to do it all over again. But there were some really like grand scale epic battles that would happen. But it seemed like they just kind of like took their focus away from what made the franchise good, which is a trend that it's kind of with all these games, a lot of the mainly shooters. And by the time the new one came out, it was so buggy and glitchy and just bad that no one just wanted to deal with it anymore, and people just threw it away really quickly. And I think around that time, Call of Duty was kind of making its comeback. It's short-lived, but glorious comeback. And yeah, Battlefield just was kind of thrown to the wayside. And I mean they were kind of just doing the same thing over and over, which somehow Call of Duty succeeded in doing that for like 20 years. But for Battlefield, I don't know. It just wasn't really in the cards for them. Um, a game I remembered that I forgot to write down, Dead Space. I wanted to talk about Dead Space. Love Dead Space. We all kind of know why that one blew up. Dead Space 3. And honestly, Dead Space is a sad story based off the reports I heard, because it had more to do with publishers and like game companies and corporate overlords than it did with the actual dev team, which is always sad. And that's also a trend that's gonna kind of gets brought up a lot with games that kind of fall off and die over time, is that the publishers and stuff just force the games to do things that no one wants them to do, that aren't fun. And what was I talking about? I'm sorry. My brain is just gone today. I don't know what's happening with me. Dead Space, yes. I liked the elements that they add into Dead Space 3. I liked kind of the open worldy elements and the kind of some of the optional mission stuff. The co-op stuff was cool, and having special missions just for co-op, but they took a lot of the horror elements out and made it more of an action game, which is what really broke it, because it's not meant to be an action game. And which is kind of the same problems that happened to like Silent Hill and what was happening to Resident Evil. Resident Evil is one of the few cases that saved itself, that started to fall off and go in the wrong direction and reeled itself back in. And what's really sad, the saddest thing about Dead Space for me is the dev team still had it in them, but because after 3 failed, they released a DLC, and the DLC was not mandated by the overlords or whatever, and it was a terrifying experience. It was genuinely scary. It was just as scary, if not more than scary, than the first game. And it was really cool and really trippy. And that really broke my heart, because I saw the potential that Dead Space 3 had, and that they just couldn't do. And I would have liked to have known how the story was going to end in Dead Space 4. And when the Dead Space remake came out, I was kind of hoping it would re-spark Dead Space. But unfortunately it didn't. And the creator of Dead Space, who was so talented in imaginary and visionary, what's his name? Schofield something. Glenn Schofield? Schofield, whatever his name is. I was so excited when he was making Calypso Protocol? I gotta look. I think it was called Callisto Protocol. Yeah, the Callisto Protocol. I was so excited when he started making that, because I thought it was basically just going to be more Dead Space, and it sucked. It was so bad. I didn't enjoy that. I beat it. I didn't play the DLC, and I'm glad I didn't, because that ending was stupid. Callisto Protocol was a nightmare because it didn't understand its own game mechanics. It introduced these super specific tuned game mechanics and then just broke its own rules and put you in situations that didn't fit the game mechanics. And that game was so infuriating. And again, they tried to add like Dark Souls combat to a survival horror game. And it's like, why? Just now, a horror-themed Dark Souls game would be awesome. A legitimate horror game set in like made by Hidetaka Miyazaki, that would be awesome. I want that. But other people trying to incorporate it, it just doesn't work. Next, Titanfall. We all know Titanfall. We all love Titanfall. Titanfall's awesome. Titanfall 2, one of the best games ever. When the servers work. When the company actually cares about its servers. Titanfall was the next big shooter. It was like the next Halo. And it brought back those old great feelings of competitive multiplayer first-person shooters with mechs. And The first game was okay. It was cool. It was different. It was new. It was brand new. New idea. Didn't really have a campaign, but it was fun. It was original. And Titanfall 2 took all those things from the first game, added an awesome campaign, added new Titans, new mechs that had different abilities and powers. It added such cool dynamics in the story mode. The campaign was so original and fresh with its different environments, like the factory level and the level where you had to jump back and forth through time and do puzzles while jumping between time. It had a cool parkour-ish system, which kind of started a trend that kind of killed like Call of Duty for a little while, where like and Halo as well, like Halo 5, where every game now had to have like a Titanfall-esque like maneuvering system, which just failed in other games, but in Titanfall it was awesome. And then the company who made Titanfall decided to make Apex because Battle Royale was the cool new thing, and still isn't fully dead yet. I don't know why. Battle Royale just needs to die already. Like, stop. Those games aren't fun. And Apex is one of the biggest ones. And I will say, of all of them I played, Apex is probably one of the better ones. But people yearn for Titanfall 3. And I read a report that says even the game developers yearn for a Titanfall 3. And their corporate overlords won't let them. Which is why corporations suck and indie games are succeeding over AAA titles, because indie games do things that are fun and creative and original and listen to their critics. Sorry, let me step off the soapbox real quick before I get too ranty. Oh boy, now let's move on to the bombshell, the PR disaster. 3 games that Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and Assassin's Creed. Oh boy, these ones have been in the news a lot. Yeah, these totally aren't hot topics. Witcher can probably be brought in here, although Witcher kind of got caught in the crossfire. That's a whole other thing. This was a topic that I kind of brought up but danced around in my news parody video that I did of me just yelling at my camera for 6 minutes, and that was definitely meant to be more of a parody, making fun of the ridiculous controversies that happened after the Game Awards in December. But these issues are still kind of there, and these 3/4 games are right in the center of all that. Now, Dragon Age. When talking about what killed Dragon Age, I don't think it's any question. I think everyone knows exactly what killed Dragon Age. Veilguard. Veilguard killed Dragon Age, and it for all the reasons we already know. And I don't want to get into a whole political topic or social whatever debate. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to just give the facts and talk about my thoughts on the things, and I mean it's indisputable the political focuses in these games, in favor of these focuses and forsaking the actual story and the gameplay. That is what's killing these games, these Western games, and that's just the fact of the matter. And regardless of if you agree with it, the masses have spoken. And the masses are what keep games alive. And these companies aren't doing themselves any favors by attacking their fans and purposely going out of their way to antagonize these people, because these are the people that buy your games. If gamers do not buy your game, you do not make money, and your company doesn't exist anymore. So if you keep pissing off gamers and making fun of them and trying to pressure them into believing what you believe in exchange for having boring games that aren't fun or don't work properly, it's like you're just asking for trouble. And Dragon Age is a prime example of that. it focused so much, and this isn't opinion, this is fact, this is in the game. They spent so much time talking about gender politics instead of having an actual game. And it's just like, it's just so bizarre to me and so ludicrous. I don't ever use that word, but it is. And I didn't play the game, but I've seen people who have, and apparently the game just isn't good because the gameplay suffers when you put all your time and effort into something that isn't important or interesting. And especially when the game is a medieval fantasy RPG. And Dragon Age was so like, it was not like, it was bloody and messy and gory, and it brought up a lot of issues and had a lot of deep drama in it, but it knew its characters. It had good characters. Even the characters I hated were still well written. And not only did Veilguard take away from a lot of like the gameplay stuff that people enjoyed and made a really mid game. I don't like using that word, but it also destroyed pre-existing characters and made them betray their own like way of doing things. Like the famous Barv scene, the famous cutscene that everyone knows about. That whole speech was given by Isabella, who was the most selfish, like narcissistic character in the games. This character literally started an entire war over pride. Like, she stole a religious artifact from a race and started this whole racial conflict that erupted into full-blown war, almost destroyed an entire kingdom, and killed tons of innocent people just because she was too prideful and stubborn to give her book back. And this is the character giving the lecture about gender politics and putting in work to show that you're sorry or whatever. It's just like, it was just ridiculous. And I feel like Mass Effect has and will suffer for the same reason, because now the thing with Mass Effect is after Mass Effect 3, which was pretty divisive at the time, it's getting a lot more love now. I personally loved Mass Effect 3, and it's the home to one of the greatest DLCs ever made, the Citadel DLC. After that, and they made Andromeda, which was supposed to be this cool spin-off, other than it launching with a ton of horrible bugs that made it unplayable, the game itself was just a very watered-down version of the trilogy. The enemies, the big plot twists with the enemies, the kind of the plot of the main character and all your squad mates and crew members, they're all just these dollar store knockoff versions of everything from the trilogy. Like the idea of the bad guys being this race that was corrupted and turned into like mutant versions of themselves that then capture other races to extract their DNA and transform them into new monsters. That's literally the Reapers and the Collectors and the Protheans. And then you have your main character, who's this hero who they went on this mission that was a complete disaster, and like the top agent was killed in action, and you now have to rise up as this new hero where you're given your own ship and permission to do whatever you want, and where this annoying, dumb council bosses you around, and then you recruit people along the way. That's the plot of the first game. And even like the crewmates and characters are the same. You know, you have the female Marine that comes across really abrasive, that secretly has like a sensitive heart. That could be either Ashley or Miranda, honestly. You got the fun-loving kind of dim-witted male Marine character that's just kind of there. That could be Caden or James or Jacob. You've got the new weird alien that is kind of an outsider that no one really knows how to interact with and is kind of strange, but also has this like fiery vengeance in his soul for what was done to his people. Javik. You've got a quirky pilot. You've got a serious older doctor. You've got an Asari who specializes in ancient technology. That's just Liara. Except PB tries to be funny and is just cringe, whereas Liara was best girl. We all know this. And then you have the the lesbian co-pilot, which was Trainer in Mass Effect 3. And now, granted, I do love Scottish accents, but you can't expect me to not think of Trainer whenever I talk to... What was her name? Suvi? Was that her name? It's been a while since I played Andromeda. I never finished Andromeda. I tried to get through it like twice. Oh yeah, you also have the quirky, like tech-centric Turian, and you have the old, chiseled... what are they called? Krogan. Old chiseled Krogan bounty hunter that is just like this wise old man that's just always cracking jokes. That's Rex. I love Rex. Rex is one of the best characters ever. But it's like they literally just took all the same things and just did it again but worse. And tried to make it a little more open worldy. And it just didn't hit. And now they've announced Mass Effect 5, and they've done trailers for it, and it's supposed to take off where Mass Effect 3 left off, but like 100 years later. And when the Veilguard stuff happened, the director of Mass Effect 5 was trying to urge people, don't worry, we're still our own independent project, we're not going to have the same problems that Veilguard had. But then BioWare decided to take all of the Veilguard people and repurpose them to work on Mass Effect, which kind of makes me scared. So I'm not really holding my breath for Mass Effect 5 anymore. It's kind of already dead to me. EA itself, not EA. BioWare. I mean, EA owns BioWare, but BioWare is their publisher. I don't know how all that works still. I'm not an expert. I didn't go to school for that. But BioWare has been failing horrifically over the years. I mean, need I bring up Anthem, which literally rendered PlayStations inoperable, which is why you should have an Xbox. But anyway, yeah, Mass Effect and Dragon Age were huge RPGs. They redefined everything. They dominated the early 2010s. And there's so many Mass Effect parodies online, especially on Gary's mod parodies of Mass Effect. There's such a big cultural shift, and it's just sad to see that kind of die. And not even bringing up what's that other game called? It's so unmemorable. I don't even. Oh yeah, Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed, and also a big box of can of worms. I almost said box of worms. We all know the things that happened with Assassin's Creed. What's the new one? Shadows? Yeah. And I saw a lot of people. I like to observe opposition and people that have opposite points from like the masses, and people were trying to like discredit the hate toward Assassin's Creed and chalk it up to just people being stupid, caring too much about race or sexuality. But the Assassin's Creed people kind of like did something really bad, where they marketed toys that inadvertently like kind of celebrated the Hiroshima bombings. But what I'm talking about is in Shintoism, they have those red gates, those wooden archways, those gates that are, I think they're supposed to simplify like a gateway to heaven. And there's always two legs to those gates, and they marketed toys, licensed toys, that was just single-legged gates, like broken gates. And the only reason that those gates were broken was because it was the wreckage after the Hiroshima bombing during World War II. So that's kind of an oops. That's kind of a big uh-oh. And they kind of just kept doing stuff like that with like just... I know those games aren't always historically accurate, but they were kind of disrespectful about it this time around. And the fact that they just kept trying to push back and make it the gamer's fault just kind of put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths about that. Because now there's kind of this culture where game developers just, instead of apologizing or admitting defeat or taking feedback, they just lash out at the fans and at the audience and try to like just like bully their way into being popular, which is not, that doesn't work. Like Witcher 4 kind of falls into this too. With Witcher 4, I feel like kind of just got caught in the crossfire during the whole thing. And I will say I would stand up for Witcher 4 if the developers of CD Projekt Red weren't pieces of garbage. But a lot of people were mad at Ciri being the main character of Witcher 4, which really kind of pissed me off because that's in the story. That's actually like a real thing. It's not just that they replaced Geralt with a woman like it was planned. The Ciri was going to become the next Witcher. If you beat Witcher 3, you would know that. And now granted, people didn't really like the design of Ciri, saying she was too ugly, but she's a Witcher and she's older now. She's like well into maturity. Like I think she's like 40 now. And she's a monster hunter. She's not gonna be attractive, you know? And she's chiseled and grizzled and gruff and has had all the chemical alterations or whatever. And, you know, the trailer actually looked pretty good. You know, I liked the trailer. And I feel like now with things like Veilguard, with all this, like, I'm gonna say the word, all this woke stuff, it's created such a hard counter movement that now people are attacking things that aren't even woke just because they're so sick of it that now they're just, everything is getting caught in the crossfire. It doesn't matter anymore. Everything is getting gunned down now. And I think Witcher 4 is one of those unfortunate things, but the developers decided to respond by threatening people and calling people garbage and making fun of people, making threats, and just being jerks about it, which isn't, not only isn't that cool, but it's not a good way to get people to side with you. And yeah. Also, Fable fell off for reasons that I don't fully know, but I think it also had something to do with ugly characters. Because I'm pretty sure Fable 4 or whatever has been in development hell for a while. But yeah, I don't know why these fantasy genres have to keep trying to like be political. Especially when they're set in times that were not at all like politically correct. But yeah, in Assassin's Creed, my last thing on Assassin's Creed is not just the stuff that happened with Shadows. I think Assassin's Creed was already kind of starting to fall off. I never really cared about the franchise, never really got into it. Black Flag was fun, mostly because I like pirates. But the games were just kind of really repetitive. It was just kind of the same thing over and over, just in a new setting. And I hated the parkour mechanics. I always hated the parkour system. It never worked for me. It was always janky and clunky. And what's really funny is when Shadows came out, they were talking about how the game had been delayed because they really wanted to spend an extra month really polishing the parkour system. And then like the first clip I saw was the parkour system failing. And that was just so funny to me. And what I've heard is that Assassin's Creed Shadow is just really just like okay. Like it is not anything to write home about. It is a playable game. It is an okay game, but it is just not, it's nothing special. And again, that's kind of falling into um, like Battlefield, Call of Duty stuff where they just keep pumping out the same game over and over, and it's just not interesting anymore. It's boring. Move on to something else. And I also heard from diehard fans that like Odyssey and Valhalla and stuff, which were games that a lot of people that didn't like Assassin's Creed liked, but Assassin's Creed fans didn't like. And I think just the kind of the combination of all those things kind of just cascaded into the falling off of Assassin's Creed. But yeah, those were the main games I wanted to talk about. Next, I wanted to go to the games that are kind of teetering on the edge of dying. The games that are falling off and haven't fully fallen off, or maybe they have. Maybe they might come back. First one I kind of wanted to bring up was Fallout. Now, I don't like the Fallout games. I don't really like anything made by Bethesda. And I've never hidden that fact about myself. I've never shied away from talking about how much I dislike Bethesda for various reasons. But Fallout, I know, is a very loved series, especially New Vegas and Fallout 3. And I heard Fallout 4 was pretty good. But then they made Fallout 76, which was a disaster. Pretty sure Bethesda even got sued for how bad it was, because it was just unplayable. It was just garbage, glitchy mess. And I know that they're still updating it, and I remember watching the E3 where they were like, we're going to save it with Battle Royale. Shut up. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know if Fallout is dead or dying, but they haven't really made a game since 76, I'm pretty sure. But part of why I put it into the not dead yet category is because of the TV show, which was somehow amazing. The Fallout TV show was so fun. I don't even like Fallout. And the TV show was awesome. The actors were amazing. The actress who plays the main girl, really good, really talented. Love her. Don't know her name. Walton Goggins. I forget his name. Something Goggins. He's awesome. I know him from the Tarantino movies, Django and Hateful Eight. I know he was in Sons of Anarchy. He did a great job as the ghoul. Love it. Great show. Really fun. So that's why I kind of put Fallout in the not dead yet. Especially, it was also refreshing because live action adaptations of games and anime kind of have a history of being bad. Fallout's one of those rare exceptions. Kind of like One Piece, where you could tell that they actually really cared and knew what they were doing and respected the source material. And the studios didn't really get in the middle of that. Because on some of those adaptations, a lot of times it is the actual writers and stuff. It's not like studios. A lot of times it is the people working on it refusing to acknowledge the source material because they want to make up their own story, but don't have the talent to actually make their own story. So they just want to take someone else's story and make it bad. And because that's the only way that they could get the approval to make a show is by using a different pre-existing title. Anyway, I'll talk about Gears of War. Touch on Gears of War a little bit. Gears of War was one of those games. So I loved Gears of War. Loved the first three. Judgment was, it was okay. It was just okay. I don't hate it as much as everyone else did, but it was just okay. Then 4 came out, and 4 was okay. 4 was good. It was bad, actually. 4 was alright. But it definitely felt like it was setting up for more. It felt kind of incomplete, the story at least. Then Gears 5 came out. And at first, I was really optimistic about it. I liked some of the elements that they added into it. Some of the kind of open-world RPG elements. The writing was a little campy, a little cheesy, but, Gears of War always kind of was. But then there were some decisions made in the story that just felt like bad decisions. And again, I'm really trying hard not to get political with things, but it did really feel like they were trying to work in issues at the time. They kind of tried to work in the whole like BLM police brutality stuff, and they just bastardized the characters and really changed the tone of the series in a really dumb way that wasn't fun or interesting. And those games should have been great because they finally answered a lot of long-awaited questions, and I don't know, they just kind of shot themselves in the foot. It is, it's bad when they decide to make a prequel instead of making the finale. Because Gears of War 6 was not announced, Gears of War E-Day was announced. So we might never see the end of the new Gears of War trilogy, and I am okay with that. But I haven't really heard anything about E-Day since the trailer came out. Though I do know they were going to dig into more stuff from the comic books, go into more of the backstory of Marcus and Dom. I did hear, however, that they were originally planning on turning it into a full, like, space adventure, which I'm glad they're not doing because that is stupid. I know that Gears of War is kind of more in the sci-fi realm, but it's always been a more grounded sci-fi. And making it a space adventure kind of sounds dumb to me. And I'm glad they're not doing that, but I haven't really heard any updates with it after that. Also, Gears of War 5 kind of sucked because of microtransactions and skins. They started pumping all these skins and adding characters like real life people as characters, kind of like what Call of Duty started doing. And I don't know why people think that's a good idea or why people think we want that. I know it probably makes a lot of money, but it doesn't make my money. And that kind of segues into the problem with COD. Not only was Modern Warfare 3 a blasphemous joke of a game, if you can even call it that, and Black Ops 6 really wasn't. I don't know, I can't talk too much about Black Ops 6 because I couldn't even get past the first 5 minutes of it. I'm just so sick of COD, and this is coming from someone who I put COD in my most impactful games list. COD meant a lot to me. It was my introduction to history. It was my introduction to my favorite band of all time, Avenged Sevenfold. And now it just sucks, and I'm just sick of it. I'm still mad at Activision about the community made mod that they tried to sue the developers because it was getting more attention than Black Ops 6. It's like, you guys already screwed up. You already shot yourselves in the foot with Black Ops with Modern Warfare 3. You're just so desperate to try to save your new title, and then it ended up going on Game Pass day one anyway. And they just keep pumping out new skins and expansion weapons that cost $100, and adding pop stars and relevant people to the games, and it's just so dumb. It's just give us a good game. So that's why, but COD is still, people still play the multiplayer. It's still a pretty popular game. So I put it in the dying but not fully dead category. And the last game I kind of wanted to tie things up with was Halo. Fitting for my background. Halo just started going in a really sour direction when 343 took over. Everyone hated 4, and then when 5 came out, 4 got better because 5 was so horrendous. I've even seen and heard that people use Halo 5 as an example on how not to make a story, which is really funny and sad. And then Infinite came out, and Infinite was the hot thing. It was the coolest thing. And then it just petered off. It just and the game got repetitive. It got boring. There were a lot of story beats that they could have gone with that they didn't, and just a lot of missed potential. And when they released the game, there was nothing in the game. The game was so unfinished. And they were oh, we're going to do this whole roadmap. We're going to add all these things over 10 years. And that never happened. And now they're working on... Well, I thought they were working on Halo 7, but I know they're working on the remake of Halo 1, which we'll see how that goes. I'm not as pessimistic about it as everyone else, but not necessarily optimistic either. And and they tried to rebrand their name. They changed the name of the company so that people wouldn't associate them with 343 anymore, which is just an admittance of how much of a train wreck that company was, that they had to change the name to try to get people to not associate them with it anymore. And Infinite really petered off, and for me, a lot of it was the multiplayer. There was a lot of hackers and cheaters, and 343 just didn't do anything about it for a long time. And then it started getting into like the whole cosmetic thing and microtransactions, and it felt like they cared way more about that than actually tuning the game and fixing it, or adding content. Bungie used to add so much content, so many map packs, and I don't know, the same attention just doesn't seem to be given to games anymore. I can say the same for like Call of Duty and a lot of other games, even Gears of War. But yeah, I don't have high hopes for the new Halo. But for some reason, people still think of Halo really fondly, and it's still like a beloved thing. It's still very popular, so I can't really call it dead yet. But it's weird. It's like Halo's like a ghost. It's like old Halo's still alive, but new Halo's dead. It's strange. It's really, really interesting. Halo's a fascinating topic. The game is so powerful, so impactful, and so many things came out of it. But yeah. And I know there's other concerns about the dev team for the new Halo, but again, I'm trying not to get into all that, because it's just more speculate. I don't know. There's a lot more political stuff, and I don't know. I'm kind of tired of talking about that because it's just such a trend with video games now, specifically Western games. And you can really see it with like games that are successful, like Eastern games, like even like Marvel Rivals, where like people just attack those games because they don't adhere to like the Western dev stuff, but the Western dev games tank, and no one likes them. And instead of trying to maintain things that people like, they're just desperately trying to change people's minds, which is never going to happen, because what they want is not fun. They're sacrificing gameplay and good story for their own beliefs, and who knows at this point. And you already there's controversy with Marathon now, which Bungie is trying to remake Marathon, which is the game they made before Halo, but it just looks bad already. Like, the trailer just does not look good. It looks like it's made by AI. And I'm not one of those people that's like, is that AI? Is it made with AI? Oh, AI trash. No, I'm not one of those people, but it does look like it's made by AI. And I'm not a fan of Destiny. I think Bungie just went way down the drain. And I know, like, Destiny had a bunch of expansions and people still play it, but it's like, who are these people? Like, where are they? Like, I don't know them. It's just funny. The video game industry is just a very interesting place, and the internet just makes it more fun. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I was struggling to come up with a topic for today's podcast. I wanted to try to do these podcasts semi-regularly. Do them like once a week, but my last week was really busy for me. I had a wedding I had to go to. Didn't have to. I chose to. I was a groomsman in the wedding. Great wedding. Loved the wedding. This is my cousin. Fun time, but it was so exhausting. And then to have Easter the day after, it was just such not a nightmare, just a really busy kind of mess. Beautiful mess. I don't know how to put it in words. I was just very tired. I kind of needed a week to cooperate. I'm just not here today. I'm just not there. Cooperate. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I cannot speak today. Today's not a good day for me. Oh, it is not a good day for Jordo. Oh my. Yeah, I just needed to recuperate for a week. And I've been playing the Metal Gear Solid games, like I mentioned, which are fun. Kind of got burnt out on them, but I do plan on going through 3. I started 3, didn't finish it, didn't get very far. But yeah, yeah, I just have a hard time kind of coming up with topics and ideas to talk about for this podcast. I have some ideas, but I don't know quite how I want to execute them, especially since I kind of have such a laid-back way of going about things, and I don't really like scripts because, I mean, you can hear how well I speak normally, and trying to read off of a script, it just makes it worse. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I hope this was somewhat entertaining. I hope this was somewhat interesting. I know I'm kind of rehashing things that have already been talked about to death on the internet. So many people talk about these same topics. Next episode, I'm thinking about maybe talking about anime games. Like the games themselves, not the animes, but talking about like why those kind of are lackluster and why, even though there seems to be more these days, they're not really that good. And just kind of giving my thoughts on that stuff and what I think would make for good games and good anime games and what ones deserve game spin-offs. But yeah, this has been the Snoopy Emu, or whatever you want to call me. This has been the Talk Emu podcast. Thank you for joining me for another well organized and orchestrated episode. And I will see you in the next one, hopefully. Goodbye.